technology has helped businesses with working from home. Our clients have heavily benefited from Microsoft 365 services, and Teams has played a big part in bringing colleagues together. We now see Microsoft Teams as the hook into Microsoft 365, as it's a core product that all businesses will benefit from and provides a whole new platform look and feel to end users. Email was traditionally the hook into Office 365, and this provided a great reliable platform for users, but it was still just email with the same look and feel as you've always had. So with Teams being a new platform with a whole new look and feel, it provides your staff with a dedicated tool for meetings, conferencing and collaboration, making it something of real interest that they can use in their day-to-day work. With Complete IT supporting hundreds of clients, and with the vast majority of having to work remotely in some fashion at the moment, we've had many questions around Teams, so we thought we would cover off some of these, some of what people have been sending us and have asked for our help desks over the past few weeks. You may already know some of these, you may not, but we hope you get some useful information from this. We were going to cover on how to use Teams, especially during the lockdown period, but we've had questions around areas to cover, so we prefer to demo as much as we can with Teams today, and then next week we'll look to do a follow-up webinar with our recommendations and how to stay connected using Microsoft Teams, and in fact how Complete IT use that. Please feel free to send questions in throughout, and we'll answer as many as we can before the end. There will be a recording sent out to all of you, and of course if any of our clients are watching and would like any assistance with their Teams usage or setting it up, then please contact your technical consultant or account manager. And for anyone else, you can contact us by phone or email, and we can discuss how Complete IT can help you. So Teams provides obviously a way to collaborate, improve your productivity and stay connected. I mentioned a minute ago Microsoft 365, and a lot of you will be familiar with Office 365. Just as a note, as of the 21st of April, the following name changes have taken place. So Office 365 for all of their business plans is now called Microsoft 365. Now, some of you may have heard of Microsoft 365. It adds on top of Office, or what was Office 365, with some additional tools around device security, data protection, advanced threat protection, etc. And now Microsoft have cancelled off their Office 365 name, and as you can see here, all of the products, and probably a lot of you will use Office 365 Business Premium, they have now been renamed to the associated Microsoft 365 naming convention. You don't lose any features, it's all exactly the same. All you'll notice is the name changing over time. So just bear that in mind. I mean, the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 names did confuse people. So although it looks a bit complicated on the screen still, I think once everyone gets used to it being Microsoft 365, things will become simpler. So what is Teams? Well, obviously it's instant messaging, as we know it, provides online meetings, audio conferencing, telephony. A new piece to, or recent addition to the Teams is telephony, so a full-blown phone system, and Complete IT can help with that. We have our own cloud phone system offering Complete Telephony, which integrates directly with Teams. So if any of you currently use Teams and are thinking about moving telephony providers, then we can help with your telephony requirements as well. And Teams Rooms. Teams Rooms is a nice addition that allows you to dedicate rooms to within your building. So for example, if you have conference rooms or meeting rooms within your building, you can put dedicated hardware in there, so microphones, cameras, screens, and then you can configure them as a specific Teams room within Teams, and then use them as places to meet. And what that allows you then is to have one camera, one set of audio devices for a whole meeting room, and makes it a lot more meeting-like, rather than having individual devices on the desks for each of you. And then there's bits that separate Teams from its competitors. So the teams and channels, posting, document storage, and team collaboration, we'll go through that. And of course, there's integration with Microsoft and other third-party applications. So Teams will be seen as a kind of central tool for your working life. As I said, it's now the hook into Microsoft 365. And I think over time, more and more people will have that as their kind of centralized tool throughout their working day. So Teams is replacing Skype. Some of you may be using Skype. You will have all heard of Skype for Business. So that provides, your conferencing, your instant messaging, but it's Microsoft's older platform and older technology for this. Teams is built on a whole new infrastructure from Microsoft, built from the ground up. So it's not kind of a passover from Skype. It's a whole new platform. And actually, Skype is being retired in the next year or two by Microsoft and is no longer being developed. And in fact, if you sign up for an Office or Microsoft 365 tenant today, you won't even have the option of using Skype. Microsoft do provide some ways to help you migrate from Skype to Teams. There's a kind of administration section on the 365 portal you can use. But if any of you are using Skype, you should consider the migration sooner rather than later. So with Teams, and as I said, being the central hub, hopefully for people around our working day, Microsoft need to make it available across platforms. So as we speak, there's clients available for Windows, Mac OS. It's available via just a simple web interface. So whether you're using a shared computer, it may be one in a library or a coffee shop, you can use a web interface. And of course, mobile devices. So that'll be Android, iPads, iOS, etc. And it's even on Windows Mobile if anyone uses one of those. But there's plenty of ways to make, use the Teams across multiple devices and then transfer from work device to personal device without losing any productivity. So the first part to Teams is chat, voice and video. You can clearly have one-to-one chats, group chats. I'm going to go through a bit about some newer additions. The scene icon might sound very small, but we've had questions around that. Message importance, attachments, apps, voice and video calls, and backgrounds. So I'm just going to switch to a Teams client. And here we have our regular Teams client. We've been in a bit of a test. I just want to show a couple of the smaller pieces. So we've been asked previously, how can we see when someone's read the message? Now, in recent weeks, Microsoft released a little update that put a little, as you can see here, a little eye icon. And that actually shows that the person not only received it, but has read it. Now, that disappeared at the outbreak of COVID because Microsoft had an unprecedented increase in the number of users and tenants that have been deployed, millions of extra, which they obviously weren't accounting for. So they had to reduce some services for a period of time in order to provide some additional bandwidth for new users. But slowly over the last couple of weeks, features that you may have seen before have come back. And this one's quite a useful one because people have often asked, how do I know if someone's read a message? So that's a feature that you should see now. Now, as with Outlook, we can also have an importance. There's an importance button. So we can set messages as standard. So when we send those, we'll just see the eye icon when they've read them. We'll see, and we can mark it as important if we want. And if we really find we want to get in someone's attention, we can send an urgent message and type that. And then, of course, they'll get, as it says here, get a notification every 2 minutes. So you can be quite persuasive now if you're trying to get someone's attention. So that's a newer piece to it, but it's quite an important piece if you need to get hold of someone quickly. Now, when we work on Word and Excel documents, etc., we might have copies flying around your infrastructure, and people have traditionally emailed them out. And if they've emailed them to multiple people, there's then, however many copies, 5, 10 copies going out to the same number of people. Within Teams, we can actually upload and send or attach files, just one file to multiple people. So if you're chatting to a group of 10 people, you can simply go in to your documents and select a file. It will then send it, and then people can download if they wish. So it's not sending 10 copies and storing those copies in your infrastructure, taking up important space and increasing your backup sizes. But it just sends them as one single, stores it in Teams, and then everyone can grab a copy if they so wish. That's a kind of better way to send files. Sending files in this way doesn't mean you're collaborating on the same file. It's just a more efficient way of sending, but collaboration will come a little bit later. Now, some other bits we can see down here, we won't go into them, we know what they are. Emojis, GIFs, stickers, If you want to have a bit of fun, you can use those. And incidentally, if that's something that you don't want for your business, you can actually turn those features off in the Teams administration. So you can get your IT department to help with that, or in fact, complete IT to help with that. Some other smaller bits you might find useful is the fact that it can integrate into applications. And as an example here, we've got Polly. So if you're chatting to a number of people and you want to do a quick poll, you can actually, Polly's a third-party app that will allow you to create a quick poll, create a question, provide some responses, and it'll give you a graph. And of course, being a live demo, it's deciding not to work as it should do, but essentially you should be able to there type in a question and a number of answers, and then you can get a quick poll very quickly for a number of people. That's just one example. Some other less useful examples, maybe if you really want to send someone the weather, seems silly, but you can just type in their location and it should then, should then find the location and you can send someone the weather, although they could probably just look out the window. And again, this one's being most useful as well. But anyway, you get the kind of idea around that. It's not well. And there's various other applications you can tap in. So wiki searches, you can do a Bing search through here. It's just small things that you can send across if you so wish. If you're in a group chat, might be quick things you want to send. And of course, you can also paste in photos if you so wish. And if you're chatting to a single person or a group of people, you can actually voice call them. So this isn't using like a landline phone number or anything. This is just using voice calls over the internet. And whilst we've been in this isolation, we've been using voice calls an awful lot instead of our mobiles because we're all set at our desks. It's a good way to quickly get hold of lots of people at once. And of course, you can do video calls and also screen sharing, and we'll cover that off in a short while. So when we create a meeting for Teams, we need to obviously populate it with the relevant Teams information so that our recipients, whether they're internal or external, can connect correctly. So there is two ways of doing that. One's via Outlook. So a lot of people will be chatting in Teams and they might flip to Outlook, but there's a little calendar option down here to schedule a meeting. And this will automatically create your meeting for you. And if you're in a chat, it will then populate the attendees with whoever you're chatting to. You can do the normal things about the date and time of the meeting, whether it repeats, etc. Add a channel in, and we'll go through channels later, and also a location. Now at the start where I mentioned Teams rooms, at Complete IT we have two Teams rooms, one in the High Wycombe office and one in our London. So that gives us the option of selecting those, and then we can, when we go to those meeting rooms, the actual equipment will fire up and provide the meeting in that meeting room for us. So that's quite a nice touch. I'll just go to a pre-arranged meeting just to show you some other bits. So once we send the invite, it will look like this to the recipient, and you'll notice that they have a join Microsoft Teams meeting. So much like any other provider of these, you click the link, takes you to a web page, and it gives you the option of downloading the Teams client. And even if the recipient isn't licensed for Teams, they can still download the client and have a rich experience, or they can use the web interface if they wish. So there's multiple options there. And I also mentioned audio conferencing at the start. So for an additional license of around £3 per user per month, you don't have to license every user, but you can provide audio conference phone numbers so that people can dial in via their landline or just from a normal phone, mobile phone, into the conference, obviously for audio only, but it just gives that option if you need it. So you can, and if you have assigned that license to yourself, then every time you create a request, you'll put that phone number in. And if you're sending it to people outside of the UK, Europe or whatever it might be, then they'll receive a local number as well. So I just want to show you a bit of video. I've pre-recorded a short section because I'm using audio, and I didn't want to, because we're streaming through Zoom, I didn't want to mess up any kind of video and audio with that. So I've recorded a short section which I'll play now.
So now we'll just go to see what happens when we join a conference. So we click the join button, your camera will initialize, as you can see me here, and then you get a number of options before you actually really join. So we can actually turn the camera on and off if we wish. We can turn the audio on and off. You can turn those two on and off during the conference if you wish. And then we can also change our background. Now Microsoft have always provided the ability to blur backgrounds, such as this. but in the last 2 or 3 weeks they've released an update that provides some custom backgrounds, but one that also allows you to add your own. So all of these here are Microsoft's built-in backgrounds, but then if you want to add your own, such as this one, you can, and as you can see, then it just makes the background look a lot more professional, especially if you're presenting to clients and prospects. You can see around the side of my head doesn't always necessarily work just as well, but this is a newer feature and that will only improve over time. But if you've got people walking by in the background or some sensitive information on the walls or whatever it might be, then this just makes it a little bit more private and professional. So once we've selected our background, we can close that. We can click join, and click on that again, and then it will connect in, and then you'll get a preview of yourself. If anyone else is joined in at this point, they will then be displayed on the screen. Clearly there's no one else in this meeting. So what will happen then is once people join in, they will be displayed on the screen, and at present you can have 4 concurrent people displayed on the screen. Microsoft are changing that within the next month, we hope, to include up to 9 people concurrently, but at present any more than 4 will appear down in the bottom right hand corner stacked up, and as they speak they will then come to the forefront, so you'll be able to see them more clearly. So just to go through some of the other options, we've got video camera, we can toggle that on and off. We can toggle our audio on and off. We can actually display our screen, which we'll go through in a sec, and then we've got some additional options here. The first is to turn off incoming video. Now if you're somewhere and having this meeting and you might have poor internet bandwidth, receiving video might be a little cumbersome to the bandwidth you've got, so you can actually turn off incoming video so that your audio quality is good. So it's obviously better to hear everybody clearly than it is just to have stuttery or jittery video. So you can turn off incoming video if you wish. You can end your meeting. You can actually start recording. So it's a nice feature if you're doing a conference or you're doing something like this. You can actually start to record and then revert back to it later. And when you do record, it will actually display a banner to everyone that's in the meeting to say that it is being recorded, so they're aware, and then you obviously can review a privacy policy if they wish. And the recording is actually saved to somewhere called Microsoft Stream, which is another feature of Microsoft 365. And this is a cloud-based storage for the video, so you can be accessed from any devices, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But it doesn't save directly to the device, so you don't have to copy it up anywhere. It's just available on the Microsoft 365 portal. In addition, then we've got keypad. So if you have Teams voice, which we touched on earlier, then you can actually dial in people if you wish. You can change your background effects again, get into full screen, see the meeting details of who's attending, look at create meeting notes. And then another good one that we've had queries on previously, specifically around the use of headsets and the fact that sometimes they may not work, the mic may not work, the audio in the headset may not work. Sometimes you actually have to specify the mic and the headset you want to use. Generally, it will default to that for you. However, there's been occasions where it hasn't, and our clients have had troubles with that. So you can come in here and select your microphone and your speaker output if you need to. Same with camera. If you have multiple cameras, then you can select the one you'd like to use. And this piece, which we'll go through in a sec, if you're presenting a PowerPoint directly to your users, then they will be able to flick through the slides if you want them to, and that just allows that option. So if we come out of that, if we click on this share, as I've touched on, here we can have the option to share a desktop. So that'll be your entire screen and all the applications that you display on your screen. So if you share your screen one and then open up an application, your audience will see that. If you have multiple monitors, it will then give the option of screen one, screen two, and so on. Here we have the option of just showing a window. So just instead of the screen, just a specific application window, and these will be listed here depending what you have open. And here we have PowerPoint. So this is where I was just talking about the end or the audience being able to flick through the slides themselves. If you click on one of your most recently opened PowerPoint presentations, that will display to the audience and then they can flick through if you wish. And finally we have whiteboard, where we can make notes, doodle, everyone can contribute, and you can save that off if you wish. So if we click to share a window, here we have, and you'll just see we get a red line around the application, and that essentially means that it's just that application that's being shared. So this will then, even if you move it, will be available to everybody and the rest of the desktop is all safe from being displayed. If you want to then quit showing your desktop or your application, you can just click the little X button down here, and that will disappear and go back to the screen, and it will also quit out of that automatically if someone else decides to display their screen or their content. And you can also provide access to others to actually control the application or the screen you're sharing if you so wish. So those are just a few pieces of what you can do whilst in a video conference.
So that's just how the video would work, and the new backgrounds feature is quite nice. We've been using it, and of course you can use it for fun things as well if you like. For example, we have a kind of Friday pub meeting at about 5 o'clock just to get everyone talking, and I've got a pub background for that, but obviously not to be used for corporate pieces. So we mentioned the recording in there. So I'm just going to go to a web interface, and here, if we go to, I mentioned Stream. The Stream is part of the Microsoft 365 services. Think of it just like a YouTube, a smaller version of YouTube, and this is where your content that you've recorded will automatically save. So here you can see the video I recorded earlier, and you can then either share it, so you can take a share link and copy that and send it out to people internally to view, or you can actually download it. So sharing is only available for internal staff at the moment. You can't share it externally, but of course being able to download it means that you can then upload it to something else like YouTube if you so wish. So this is a nice little platform to host all your internal video content. And another nice thing about this, if we just go into a previous webinar we've done, is the fact it can transcript everything. So maybe if you have people that are hard of hearing in your business, they can then still view the content and read what the person was saying within it. So that's quite nice. Now, of course, as you know here, we're using Zoom for this webinar. Microsoft do have something called live events, and that is their equivalent of providing a webinar. It's slightly different in the fact that you have to have an encoder, a piece of hardware, or you use an external service to encode the content so that you guys can actually see it. So it's a little bit more at the current time difficult to do some things, but obviously would have liked to have done this whole webinar via Teams itself, but it's something that we're working on for the future, which is why we're not using it at the moment. But some of you may have wondered if we can use that. But yes, Teams live events is what is the equivalent of essentially Zoom. So that's Stream for you. What we're doing now is I'm just going to go back and get, if you give me 2 seconds, the Teams window, which I've just put on another screen. Bear with me. Right, here we go. So Teams itself, so this is obviously the piece that differentiates between the rest of normal chat, instant messaging, etc. So in the Teams section here, we have all our teams that we've got listed. Now, when you start to use Teams, everyone by default will have access to create teams and as many of them as they want to. If your business hasn't started using Teams yet, or you're just very new to it, I would strongly suggest that you actually define how you want to use Teams and what teams you want and how the makeup of those is made. Because as we found with many of our clients and new users to Teams, everyone can then go out of control with it and create a team for everything. And before you know it, you could potentially have hundreds of teams. So it's really worth making sure that you plan how you want to use your teams. And we'll go through a few bits of the teams now, obviously, but just in view here, we've got teams that may commonly use. You can actually hide the teams, and then they'll appear under a list here. I'm not going to show those because there's a few names on there, but you can hide teams, so you've got your most commonly used teams towards the top. Now, within each team, you have the team itself, which is a kind of collection of people and content, depending on the subject matter. So you might use it for departments in your business, or you might have a team for different projects, depending on what your business does. And then under each team, you can have multiple channels. So they're kind of dedicated sections for conversations, posts, topics, projects, etc. So you'll have multiple of those under each team. So where I mentioned a team for department a minute ago, you might have a department team, and then you might have your marketing department, your sales department, procurement department underneath there, and then they can each have their own set of tabs, which we'll go through now. But if we want to create a team, there's a couple of options. Create team button, and we can build a team from scratch, which we'll do in this case, or we can create from an existing team. So what you might find is that you might, for example, create a team for a project you do for a client, and that team might need to have a certain structure to it. So what you essentially could do is create a template team and then use that for every time you wanted to create a project or you have a new client project. So you don't have to add all tabs in and do everything from scratch every time. But in this case, we'll just build one from scratch. And then we get three options: private, public, and organization-wide. So org-wide will allow you to, or allow anyone in the organization to access the team automatically, or in fact, they're already being made a member of it. Public is available for anyone to add themselves, and private is one that you have to allow people to join, or you specify yourself who you want to join. So I'll just call this webinar as an example, and then we can put a description if we want. And then that's that. And then we'll get asked if we want to add people. So I can just put Jess in here, click add, and when we add someone, we get the option of either making them a member or an owner. So an owner will have full control over the team. They can add people, they can remove people, they can configure settings, they can add channels, they can do all sorts. Well, they can do everything. And a member will have a slightly less privileges. And we'll see in a minute, there are some settings you can make changes for that dictate what members can actually do. So leave just as a member, and you can obviously add additional people here if you wish. Click close, and that is a team set up. So here is the team webinar, and then this is the first channel. Now each team you create will have a channel called general. You can't remove it, you don't have to use it, it's kind of the default channel, but then you can create as many channels as you want underneath it. But first of all, if we go to the little dots to the side of the team to look at the management of the team, see the extra settings. Here again, you can add additional members. And you may also notice the word guests there. A nice advantage of Teams is that you can actually add a guest user from another tenant, so maybe one of your clients. As long as they have a Teams license, you can then give them permission to access this team. So as I was kind of using an example of creating a team for a project, you might want to be able to give your customer, your client, access to that team for the duration of that project. It's worth noting that if you do provide your guests access to a team, then they will automatically have access to all of the channels under that team. So you have to be careful about who you provide access to. However, as you'll see in a minute, you can now create channels which you can be marked as private, and then you can assign specific people from that team access to them, so they're protected from anyone else. So that's the kind of permissions. We then have pending requests. So whereas this would be a private team, if someone wants to access it, then any request would appear here. Here's the channels. Obviously, we've only got the general one at the moment, but they would appear here. Settings. If you wish, you can assign a picture to it. Now, these are the permissions for people that are assigned as members. So these are the different permissions you can change. So you can, different options you can allow them to do. Now, guests have far fewer permissions and nothing by default, so they have read only by default. But if you want to change anything, you can. And then you can actually turn off all those emoji pieces if you so wish. And then once the team's a bit more mature, you can have a look at analytics for it if you want. Get the number of users that are on it, how many apps, the size of the SharePoint files, etc. for it. And apps, as we had apps in messaging and in the chat, we also get apps here as well. And they're far more useful in the main teams section here, and the 6 that are enabled by default. But you can add some more, and we'll go through those in a short while. So that's the team and the configuration. So we can set all the permissions, etc. And then we can add our channels. So we've created one here called, or team called webinar. So we might add a channel called Teams, webinar on Teams. And we can add that. And here is where you select whether it's standard, so everyone in the team can access it, or whether it's private. If you mark it as private, click next. You can then type the name of anyone who's a member of that team, and they will have access to it. If you only add, whoever you add here, they're the only people that have access to it. So anyone else, any guests, will not have access to that. And then of course we can add a second one for, like, say, complete telephony, because we looked at that video a minute ago. And we'll make this standard. So there's our two teams. Now by default, you have three sections. You have the chat. Oh, it's just expired. You have the posts. So these are posts for that team. It's not kind of one-to-one chats. These are things you might want to announce about your project in a specific channel. So you can use it to have chats with people as well, but it's designed more for posts about updates for information. We can assign files. So this is a useful feature. So where we have previously used files, in a file share on our server, so through mapped drives as an example, then we can now move these all into teams and make them available across all those platforms. As I mentioned, it's available across all of your tablets, all of your web interfaces. So any files you store in Teams are available across multiple devices. So they're easily accessible from wherever you are. And the advantage to this is, we're using it, we can drag and drop files into the team. So if I just get some files up, just to show you, grab some files, paste them in. It's as simple as that. And then those are available for access throughout the teams. Now, some of you may want to access your data through something like a traditional map drive. It's more convenient, especially if you use the example of having a team for your departments. You may choose to put all of your departmental data into separate channels. And of course, you might want to access that via Windows Explorer. And what we can do is simply click the sync button. And then if you're using OneDrive, which most of us are these days, it will then simply add under your tenant name, so the complete IT, there's our files. So we can then open and access those in the same way as if it was a traditional map drive. And of course, you can sync as many libraries as you want, and it could get quite complicated. Of course, that's where it comes along with defining and planning how you want to use your teams and channels. And if you're using them for projects, you may then stop the sync once the project's complete. Obviously, the files will stay in Teams, but then they're not clogging up your Explorer. That just makes it easier to work in a more traditional way with files and folders if you wish to use that way. Of course, once we've got files and folders in here, we can open them up in the normal way. We can click on the file and it will open up within the Teams client itself, or we can actually click on the dots and choose to open it up in Excel Online, or actually in your proper Excel application. If we do click in here, then it will open up just like this. And then if it's opened up in Teams, you can collaborate with colleagues. So if you see up here, our colleague Jess is in this spreadsheet as well, and she can review what I'm typing, and she can type other bits as well, as you can see here. And so we can collaborate at the same time. And even if you open it up in Word or Excel, the application, you get the same feature set. So working on storing your files in Teams makes your collaboration much easier. And of course, because the data itself sits in SharePoint in the back end of this, you essentially get versioning as well. So if there's mistakes made or you need to revert to an old version, you can go into SharePoint and you can actually revert to an older version if you so wish. So although it's not such a backup, you can go back to previous versions. So that's quite a useful feature there. So we'll close it off for now. And then by default, we'll also have a wiki if you want to use it. So that's just another default tab that you have by there. So we can add additional ones in, as many as you want. So we can go through an example of, say, adding Excel sheet in. So maybe that Excel sheet we've just seen, so that will then default to your files location. You can click that. We can give it a name. don't know, our table. Click save, and then that appears as a sheet here, and that will automatically open up every time you click it. Maybe something else would be a website as an example. So here we can add a website in if we want. The IT, and this website, let's go down there. And this website can be anything, and it might be something you're using for a project and you want to save it on a tab for access, or it might be a portal you need to access as part of the project. We can also add in PowerPoints, other SharePoint libraries, even the stream videos. So if we go back to stream, we can actually paste in a video. So if we go back to our Explorer here, where we actually shared it, we can take our share URL, copy that in, paste that, and there's our video. And if we save that again, then we can have videos. So you can see you can add lots of different apps and services into this quite naturally. And then there's other bits. So some people have asked about other Microsoft tools. So we've got something here called Planner. So Planner, for those that don't know, is a project planning tool. It's not Microsoft Project. It's a kind of more basic version. It provides a very good platform. So if we're using it again for this for projects, we can then create tasks. So here we have what's called a bucket, and you can create multiple buckets, and those buckets can be for, say, for different phases of your project, and then you can add tasks to each phase, and you can assign due dates and assign members of the team to those tasks. And when you've built this out, you can then review it. So if I just pop into one that we've got pre-built somewhere, this is a test one. You can see here, we've got a bunch completed, but what you can get is a nice chart from it as well, to then see all of your tasks, all of your buckets, who's assigned, what's left, due dates, a kind of timeline of all your tasks, etc. So it makes it quite nice, viewable, and you can also pop this out into a SharePoint site if you so wish. So that's another tool, Planner. So there's lots of bits that snap into Teams, but that's another tool, Planner, that you can add in yourself. And then we can also add in things like forms. So if anyone doesn't know forms, it's the equivalent of SurveyMonkey. So if we flip back to this, close that down, we should have here, let's just pop that with the forms here. So we can actually create our own forms for things like surveys or questionnaires, or anything you need to really. And it's just an example one here, and you can create and add questions as you wish. Just by clicking add buttons, and you get lots of different options for the different types of questions you want to ask. But once you've created a form, you can then add it as a form as another tab. And that's from an existing form. And that's useful if, again, in this project or this department you've got this team for, you need to have a form to populate some data from people about certain sections of the project. So, you know, there's quite a lot of forms or tabs we've put into this now, and you can actually fill it out as much as you want, and can quite quickly build out a channel to do a lot of your work day to day, and all in one place. And as I've said, then that will filter across multiple platforms and makes it really usable from anywhere and from any device. So it's quite usable. One other thing that I wanted to show about capturing data was Power Automate, which someone asked a question on. So where we've selected a form here, just a quick demo of Power Automate will allow you to take the data you capture from the form and then, say, push it into a spreadsheet. So I'll just quickly show that. So when we receive a response from a form, we're going to pick a form, we'll choose our webinar form, next step. Then we'll say we want to push it into Excel. Right, sorry, actually, next step, then we want to get the responses. So get details from form. And again, you select the relevant form and get the list of responses. And then we want to put it into Excel. So then we want to update, add a row to a table. And what we can do is then select our team that we've chosen before, we've just created. We can select our documents. And we should find that spreadsheet we copied up, which we do. And then from within that spreadsheet, you may remember there was a table. So we select table 1. And then we can actually paste all of the questions into the relevant sections of that table. So then when someone submits a form, it will update this spreadsheet and the responses in it. So then you can review that through one pane of glass and then make some statistics on those forms if you want. So that's that. So if we now fill in a section on here, live demo. Oops. Yes, yes. Submit. Theoretically, back in our spreadsheet, this is theoretically, it should in a sec populate. Sometimes that will go through some live demos always work, but essentially you can use, what I'm trying to show is that you can use a lot of tools within the Microsoft 365 platform, which are free and included as part of your subscription, to do a lot of your day-to-day tasks and to populate data to bring it all into one place. And there's a lot of additional pieces of information and tools in there that people don't generally know about and use, but Teams allows you to bring that all together. So as you can see, that's then populated this here. So that could be quite useful. And of course, with forms, you can actually send links out to external parties. So if you need to gather that information from a client, then, or a number of clients, you can get them to do that and it will populate it for you in here. And then you can obviously run some additional Excel queries and formulas on it to manipulate the data if you so wish. So that's quite a nice feature set for the Teams client. So that's using Power Automate, that's using forms. We've used Planner, which we've tied in. We've tied in Excel sheets, we've tied in websites. We've used Stream to assign videos. And then of course we've used our files to store data for this project or department and also synchronize those to our local device for access in a more traditional way. So that's quite a nice little set of features that we can build out quite quickly. And as I said, you can then create a new team from this and it will then populate all of these different forms or tabs and you can just add in the relevant data to them. So you could, could create quite a complex team and channel structure and then replicate that multiple times with a few clicks of the mouse. So quite configurable and useful. And of course, along with all the other pieces of instant messaging and video conferencing, makes it a very useful tool for your day-to-day business. So Complete IT use Teams heavily throughout the day, and we have a lot of Teams, and we've made the Teams more relevant these days, having gone through the pain and learned ourselves how it can get out of control. You can limit who can create teams and channels. So if you want to actually restrict who can do what, then you can actually define the structure that you need and build that out yourself. Like I said, there is an administration console, which we won't go into because it might look quite complicated, but there's an awful lot of configuration we can do in there to manipulate what features are available and how people can interact. One thing I will show when we've created a channel is there is a separate section of configuration for the channel itself, very small, but we can actually set moderators for a channel. So if we don't want anyone to be able to post to the team or the channel, then we can actually set moderators for the channel if we want, and then they can set the relevant permissions of what people can and can't do. because if you have a channel for a specific task and then people start posting through it for other subjects, then that's the kind of thing you might want to stop so that it's not being misused, and you can kind of restrict and moderate who's using what within that. So that's kind of general overview of some features of Teams. These are things that people or our clients have asked us, and how can we use, what can we use. So I think if we just flip back to the presentation, covered off team creation, default team components, channels, permissions, files and folders, and some apps. Teams live events I've talked about briefly. So like I said, it's part of Zoom. Well, it's not part of Zoom, it's like Zoom, but it's kind of not quite to the same level as Zoom as yet, because you need an encoder. So hopefully that will develop over time with Microsoft, and then we can use Teams live events over and above Zoom, because we're a Microsoft company, of course, our house. Teams meetings. Yeah, so this is like your Teams room. So where we discussed about that earlier. In this example, there's obviously a big TV on the wall, and it just means that everyone can collaborate in one room rather than have their own individual feeds. It just makes it much more usable, and of course the people at the other end will just see the room as a whole, like a normal boardroom, which is quite nice. We've got a number of resources on our website. So we have weekly webinars at the current time, and they're on our website. We have resource pages for our webinars, PDFs, data sheets, top tips, we have blogs, we have social media. We have a complete training portal that we provide to all of our clients for free now. So each of our clients will get access to a training portal for up to 25 users, which has training around Teams, has training around other Microsoft technologies, plus also some pieces on cybersecurity and other subject areas. So if we go and take some questions from the list I've got, if you bear with me, let's get the list of questions up. Okay, so someone asks, how can I tell whether a member of the team is at their desk? So this is easy to do in Skype for Business. So there's the status notification. So you can see if it's green, if they're available, or if they're in a meeting, it'll be yellow, or if they're busy, it'll be red. But there's also a status for showing them as away. So if their laptop or desktop is locked, or it's gone to sleep, then it will show them being away. So hopefully that works there. Does the meeting scheduler link to Microsoft Outlook? Yes, so the calendar we went to within Teams, that's exactly the same calendar that's within Outlook. It's just if you create your meetings within the Teams console itself, then it automatically populates all of the Teams information, the meeting information. If you want to create the Teams meetings through Outlook, that's fine. If you've got the modern version of Outlook, when you create a new meeting request, you should see this as a Teams button in the top toolbar. If you click that, then it will make the meeting into a Teams meeting and then populate the details as I showed you earlier. But it sometimes is just to go straight from the Teams client itself. Can you prevent access to private with an admin? No, I don't believe you can at the moment. So private, when you set up, I'm assuming you mean with the channel, that's a newer feature as it is. I don't think you can tell the administration center not to have that as an option, but we can check that out. Are you able to convert multiple separate teams to channels now that you can set access levels? No, so if you've already got a team and a set of channels under it, then you can't convert a channel to a team or anything like that. You'd have to create a new team, but obviously you can copy content over, such as files and folders, and then re-establish the tabs within that channel if you want to. But there's no kind of copy and paste or basically conversion of a channel to a team at the moment. When you send a file to a team by uploading it in the chat, do they collaborate? No, so that just uploads it to the Teams platform, but then if someone downloads it, they'll have a kind of separate copy. So that's, I kind of said, I think I said at the time, it's not a collaboration. It's just a smoother way of sending files without having multiple copies going and being stored in your systems. The collaboration comes when you open up files from within Teams itself, as you saw when Jess was in the Excel spreadsheet earlier. Can you do things like records management and workflows? Yes, you can do anything you need to, really. I mean, there's all kinds of workflows within SharePoint, and you can add in SharePoint sites into different tabs. You can use Power Automate, like I just showed you, to create some workflows and some automation. I mean, that was a very small piece of Power Automate. It will tie into all of the different Microsoft apps and third-party apps, and it will wait for certain actual things to happen, such as receiving info from a form, and then you can get it to do all sorts of other weird and wonderful flows and data manipulation, etc. If you create a Teams template, can this include standard documents to be created? No, so what happens when you create a team from an existing, it will then create all of the tabs and all of the channels in the same manner, but at present, it doesn't actually copy any of the documents that are in the source team. I've located how to create a team. Is it at the bottom left? Yeah, so when you want to create a team, it's at the bottom of all your teams list. It says create or join an existing team. And then you can click that and it will list all of your existing teams or give you the option to create a new one. I did it in a slightly roundabout way just because some of our teams got client names in which we didn't want to display. So I did it where it didn't display all of that. But at the bottom of the teams, where they're listed in your Teams client, you can click display, create or join an existing team. Are all the apps and functions that you have shown available in standard 365 offering? Yes, they're all there. That's all by default. If any third-party ones are there, then you can, as long as you've got an account with them, you can log on and access them in. You used to be able to put things like Twitter in, but I know that got removed fairly recently. But there's a whole array of different apps you can put in there, so it's worth having a look. And where I went to add in the app a minute ago, there wasn't a more apps section which you can click and then you can search all sorts. So you can add in external portals, and then of course you saw me add in a website, and of course if you need to log on to an external portal, then you can just add that in as a website anyway, just to that section if you still wish. What's the difference between files on the left-hand menu and files within a team? So the ones in a team are just for that team. Any files on the left-hand menu will be your personal files that you may have, for example, uploaded during an instant message chat. So if you upload a file in an instant message chat, it copies it into Teams and then shares that with your recipients. If you then upload that same file again, it will say, do you want to replace it because it's got the same file name? But that's just your kind of personal Teams area of files. So those aren't files that everyone can see, but only if you share them. Does Microsoft Planner on adding a clear? Oh, does Microsoft plan on adding a clear feature to remove old chats and calls? No, there's no way to currently remove old chats manually. Obviously, you can delete the team. You can delete your own responses, but if they've been read, then of course they've been read, so there's nothing you can do about that. But no, because you've got to remember Microsoft 365 it's got a bigger picture. It's got lots of security and compliancy tools, so it will sometimes use, if you need to use those tools to review what people have been doing, depending on what regulations you have for your business, then it doesn't let you currently delete all of the data because it might need to be searched for data subject requests, etc. So without physically deleting the team, or then there's no way of removing the chat. And if you've got a one-to-one chat with someone, you can't get rid of that either. Is forms only for internal use? No. So for internal use, you can make it just for internal use. And then if you do, it then records who's responded, because obviously they've authenticated with their Microsoft 365 logon. So then it will record who's made the thing, but you can actually make it anonymous, and then you can just send the link out to whoever you want to, and then they can populate the form and submit it. You could probably put a text box in to ask for their name, but of course if it's anonymous you can't automatically record their name. We struggle with how to handle a document that is used by a team but want to share it with 1 or 2 extra people, maybe just read only. Struggle. Well, you can, obviously the documents, Excel sheets, etc., stored within a team are available for that team. You can always right click and share, so especially if you sync it with your Explorer, you can share it with other people and choose whether that's read only or writable, and then they'll just, and you can send that as like a link. So if you're using OneDrive as an example, you'll note that your documents, your pictures, your desktop syncs by default, and anything in those locations you can then share. So you can then go to your synchronized files and folders from your team or your channel, and then share that with someone else if you wish. So are there any recommendations for documentation, white papers about best practice for planning, creation of teams, naming, etc.? Well, there's a whole bunch of videos, we can send links out, that Microsoft provide about additional teams training. So obviously we've gone through quite a high level in the short time we have, but there's specific video content on what Microsoft recommends. But of course, every business is going to be different. So if you want something, you're going to have to kind of get a group, maybe with the department heads, and you're going to have to decide how you want to use your teams, define them, and your channels, and how the permissions and how you want those to be accessed. It's going to be different for every business, but I think if people want to start using it for things like shared file and folder access, then it's quite easy to create a team and define who has access to that and channels, and then have like a channel for each department in the business, and then they can have their own folder structure, much like they probably do now. You probably maybe have one big shared drive with separate folders for separate departments, etc. So after that, you can pretty much replicate that, but of course then it makes it much more available across all your team's clients, and obviously via synchronization. Can we send a message from Outlook to a team channel? Yes. If you right click the channel or go to the 3 dots, you can actually choose generate email address, and then that is an email address for that channel, and if you email it, it will then create that email as a post. So you can then, if you need to do that, and again, that kind of thing can be then used in Power Automate, for example. So and again, for the example where we took the data from the form we created, you could then have that Power Automate script populate the Excel sheet like we did, but then also send a post via that email address to that channel to say you've received a response or something like that. So there's lots of different things you can do. Okay, so there are a whole bunch more questions. We'll try and answer these offline because we've reached our hour now, 2 o'clock. So thank you for watching. Like I said, if you're an existing client and want any help with configuration of teams and channels and how you might use it more effectively, then please get in touch with your account manager or your consultant. And if you're not a client, then obviously visit our website. There's a chat function on there. You can email us, call us, and we can discuss how CIT can help you. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of the day.